Good evening. Thank you for tuning to the Budget Forum. I'm Treasurer Lee from the TVB. This current term of the government just announced the first budget. It was delivered in the morning, and at the press conference in the afternoon, some of the details were discussed. We have Mr. Paul Chen, the Financial Secretary, here to talk to us about the budget further. There are again 5 TV operators involved. Jointly hosting this budget forum. We have Mr. Sammy Chin from Phoenix TV, Ms. Fong Ka Li from RTHK, Andrew Yun from Cable TV, and Leung Wing-Yi from Now TV. The Financial Secretary would first like to say a few words to the public. Thank you. Good evening, members of the public. The theme of the budget is leaping forward steadily. Together we bolster prosperity under one new vision. After 3 years of the pandemic, we are now coming out of it, and the economy is starting to recover. But we need to consolidate this recovery. And at this juncture in time, we know, of course, everyone was under immense pressure in the past few years, so we still try to do our best to support individuals and the enterprises. And then you might wonder, well, if we want to support the public and businesses, how come we are offering less tax relief and other incentives? It's because we're going to have a deficit of $440 billion this year. Next year, $54 billion. In the next 5 years, in 4 years, we will have a deficit. So that's why we hope you would understand that we are trying our best to offer you the assistance that we could afford to. And what is important is that we promote economic development. In the near term, we're going to launch the Happy Hong Kong campaign. Hopefully, you will all take part in the gourmet marketplaces at different districts, and then there are different other groups such as the Cyberport, the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, Disneyland, Ocean Park. They're going to plan various activities for you. So together with your family members, you can have a good time attending these activities. In this budget, we have devoted more coverage to vigorously developing our economy, because this is a critical stage for us to move from governance to prosperity. So we need to seize upon this opportunity and the support given to us by our motherland. And also under the 14th five-year plan, there are already directions mapped out for us. So we need to work hard to develop our economy, and then we could create more jobs for the public. And then the government will also have more revenue, and then we'll be able to enhance our services on various fronts. Thank you. Financial Secretary, you said you try to give something to everyone in the budget, and we can see that. But then we know that this year we're going to have a budget deficit of $140 billion. And under the circumstances, you're still disbursing $5,000 of consumption vouchers. Some have suggested perhaps you should save the money for longer-term planning. And then in the afternoon, you said you do just one more round of consumption vouchers. You know there are divergent views in the community. So is it the case that we could expect there to be no more consumption vouchers after this new round? Well, we've been through several years of pandemic. Yes, we are starting to see an economic recovery, but we have not fully recovered, and the external environments remain complex. And if there are any changes in the external environment, it will affect us because we are an externally oriented economy. And in any case, the past few years, we've all had a hard time. So we believe that we could still make use of the consumption vouchers to consolidate our economic recovery, and then maybe people will be willing to spend more, and it will help us to stimulate our economy. Of course, in the long run, the consumption voucher idea won't work because it's costly. So that means we could expect not to have future consumption vouchers in the future. Well, we have to look at it year from year, and we will consider the matter very prudently. Now, the International Monetary Fund would actually come every year to do an assessment for Hong Kong. Last time, it's suggested we should have a tax reform. because we need to have more stable sources of tax revenue. So will you start working on that? Because in this budget, you didn't mention much about new taxes or reforming or reviewing the tax system. Well, we have considered various options, but as I've said, we've been through 3 difficult years. So members of the public and SMEs would all like some breathing space first. And so that's why we don't believe this is the time for increased taxes. As for new taxes, there are different proposals in the community. We've also done some studies. And if we want to introduce new taxes, we have to consider the relevant policy and objectives. We have to see if there's any conflict with our existing policies, and there has to be informed discussion in the community. And then hopefully we could arrive at a mainstream consensus before we take things forward. TMHK on new taxes. In the past, when it comes to general sales tax or capital gain tax for properties, there's always strong resistance. Now we have the new term of the government. Maybe you want to first consolidate a position before you work on that. So when do you think would be the right time to introduce new taxes or at least do some studies? Well, we keep doing studies. As for introduction of new taxes, this is something that we should discuss. But at the same time, we have to be clear about our policy objectives. We believe, as I mentioned earlier, at this point in time, we are all focusing on developing our economy. We want to make the pie bigger. And also, we are trying to compete for talents and businesses to come to Hong Kong. So if we change the tax system too much at this point, it will affect people's perception of Hong Kong, because the simple and low tax regime is, after all, an advantage of Hong Kong. So we have to watch developments closely, and we have to consider various options. And at an opportune time, then there could be a discussion in the community. So you are not proposing any new taxes, but shouldn't you start doing some studies? Because this government is still popular, is still enjoying popularity among the public. But if you wait till the economy is good, then you talk about it, it's too long of a wait. And then if the economy is poor, you say it's not the right time. So that means, there will be problems with the tax system persisting. Well, there is not really the right time as such, perhaps, but we just need to be prepared. And I can tell you, within the government, we've been weighing all options all the time. And of course, at different times, you have to consider different priorities. We have to consider the social condition and public sentiment. Now, for the budget, yes, we're going to have a relatively large deficit this year, and also there will be a deficit next year. But then on infrastructure, we need to invest much resources, say in the transport infrastructure and so on. So that's why we are proposing to issue bonds. Now, for unpaid debt is only 4% of our GDP. So in the next 5 years, after we issue more bonds, the debt ratio is still less than 10% of GDP, is at a really low level compared to other advanced economies or even our neighbors. So there is room indeed for us to make use of different tools to manage our cash flow. I think in the medium to long term, I remain optimistic about our economy, but then there's a need for industries to undergo transformation. We need to attract more businesses to come to Hong Kong, and this all takes time. So we are working on several fronts. We are getting ourselves prepared on different fronts, and then we will watch the developments closely. Now, when it comes to the tax system, it's not just about ourselves. We have to consider our competitors against other economies. Now, in 2025, we are going to follow the latest global effective tax rate arrangement, and then we will be getting an additional $15 billion in tax revenue then. Now, we just talked about the tax regime and bond issuance, and you said you're going to issue at least $50 billion worth of silver bond. Well, we issue silver bonds to promote inclusive finance. It's not for investment in infrastructure. And then silver bond is for subscription by the elderly aged 60 or above at a preferential rate, because we want to offer the elderly another investment option that has good return, but at the same time is safe. So did you subscribe any bonds yourself? No, I didn't. I want to give others a chance to do so. Now, the silver bond, the yield is now 4%. But then even with fixed deposit now, the rate is 4%, and the wait is not as long. So why are you still issuing silver bonds? Last year, when we issued silver bond, the yield was not as high. Last year, there were several rounds of interest rate hikes, and when we issue silver bonds, definitely the rate will be very competitive. And then, if you issue bonds, you have to pay up eventually. So does it mean you're just delaying issues and problems? Well, as I said, for silver bond, we don't use the money for investment. We just make sure that there is enough money to redeem the bond eventually, and with interest. And over the years, even after we have paid up the bonds and the interest, we still have a surplus of $10 to $20 billion. And so and with the issuance of other bonds, it's just to help us in our cash flow a bit. We are confident in the development of Hong Kong in the future, and we are confident in our tax revenue in the future. So let's take a break. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Budget Forum. We'll start with Mr. Sammy Chin from Phoenix TV. Financial Secretary, our economy was not doing well last year. 4 quarters of economic contraction in a row, 3.5% contraction in GDP for the whole year. Is our economy looking good? The worst part was a shrinking of 3.5%. In the best of time, but the forecast is between 3.5 to 5.5% in terms of the growth forecast. But there are so many uncertainties. We don't know when the interest rate hikes will stop in the U.S. Exports have dropped. Over the past 4 years, we have seen cash handouts and followed by 3 years of consumption vouchers. Is there a drop in the marginal benefits coming out of the consumption vouchers? How much is the boost of the consumption vouchers to the economy? For the consumption vouchers, along with the relief measures on rates, that involves $59 billion or so. The boost to the economy is 0.1%. We're upbeat about the economy this year for a reason. Last year, there was a sharp drop in exports by more than 10%. You are right to say that the external market remains weak. The same goes for the Europe, and there's also a slowdown in the U.S. Last year, there was a constraint on exports because of the disruptions to the overland transport between Hong Kong and the mainland. Last year, the mainland's economy was weak. But now this year, COVID has been brought under control. Normal travel has been resumed. We can see a swift recovery in the mainland economy. For the ASEAN, they're also seeing rapid growth. Despite the situation last year, ASEAN economies saw good growth. The trade volume between ASEAN and Hong Kong is also on the high side. In fact, it exceeded our trade with the EU. Turning to consumption, we have resumed normal travel with the mainland. We're seeing more visitors. Last year, things were tough, but then consumption dropped by only 1%. Now we expect strong growth from visitors. The visitors will also help boost consumption. The interest rate hikes are slowing down, maybe a couple more times, and that's it. We're also seeing better business sentiment this year. We believe there will be more investments from businesses. Last year, the drop was 10%. All these factors lead us to believe that the economic growth forecast this year between 3.5 to 5.5% is achievable. In the medium term, we are also upbeat. Because of catch-up growth, Europe and the US are not doing well now, but then after a while, they will be back onto their growth track. So that's the basis for our growth forecast. Last year, the fiscal deficit was worse than expected, almost at $140 billion. Last year, we saw a drop in the land sales results and the stamp duty revenues. For the year to come, you expect $50 billion or so in deficit. Is that too rosy a forecast? Could it be that we're going to see worse deficit than expected? In fact, we're getting more revenues from stamp duty this year than last year. Take the property market as an example. The correction was roughly 15%. There was a drop in the transaction volume. Last year, roughly 45,005 transactions. The year before, 75,000 transactions. And the years before that, the 8-year period before that, you got roughly 60,000 transactions every year. Now things have stabilized in the property market. So we expect higher transaction levels in the property market, and home prices will stabilize. For the stock market, things were tough in the first 10 months last year. Hang Seng Index once plunged to 14,000 points or so. But now the mainland economy is doing better, and we are also doing better. So I expect the stock market to do better than last year. For land prices, we have referred to the land sale list. There were abortive tendering exercises last year. We had this situation in the past, abortive exercise, and then we managed to sell the sites later on at a higher price. So we have to look at the situation, the land sale list. Over to Leung Wing-yi from Now TV. The harsh measures were put in place to curb speculation. Home prices have dropped 15%, but then the drastic measures are staying. Does that mean that scrapping those measures will be out of the question in the next few years? Or are you worried about speculation will be back with the resumption of normal travel? The demand management measures, also known as harsh measures, have to do with a tight supply. We want to give Hong Kong people priority in buying their homes. That's why we have introduced a buyer stamp duty. This is the policy intent. I looked at the transactions in the home market last year. There were 45,000 transactions. 90% of the transactions involved first-time buyers, Hong Kong people. The transactions involved mostly small to medium-sized flats. So we want to give priority to local first-time home buyers. You mentioned adjustments to the ad valorem stamp duty. The effect is only a difference of tens of thousands of dollars. Is that really going to make people more willing to buy property? As I said, last year, 90% of the property transactions involved first-time buyers involving small to medium prices flats. When you have first-time buyers buying small to medium prices, I'm trying to think of a way to lessen the burden. The difference may be $30,000 to $50,000. With that money, people can buy electronic appliances also. We touched on land and property. There are recent media reports about abortive land sales. This goes for both residential sites and also for sites for business development. There's market correction. Private developers are not comfortable with buying a site at a certain price. Too much bread, so let's leave the flour for later. There will be 12 sites for residential buildings. Will the government break down those sites so that the government can have an easier time selling those sites and generating more revenues? We have experience in dealing with abortive tendering exercises. There was a site at Peak. We broke down the site into 2 plots. As it turned out, the price was higher than we got. Take Silhowan as an example, a site for topside development. You cannot just look at the abortive exercise itself. You have to look at the conditions as a whole. When I was the Secretary for Development, I handled the case at the abortive exercise at Tai Wai Station. I looked at the conditions. After some adjustments, the site was sold. For cases of abortive land sales, we have to look into why that happened before we can reach a conclusion. Our goal is to ensure stable supply of land for the market, and then we can have a steady supply of flats. We don't want to have short-term volatilities disrupt the process. In the next 5 years, it will be 100,000 flats that will come out. Hiccups have happened with the land sales. Is that going to affect your forecast? We have 4 sources of land: government land, railway project, redevelopment sites with or without land premium, and also from the Urban Renewal Authority. Timing is not the issue. We have learned from our experience. We cannot be distracted by market volatilities. We have to ensure steady supply of land, and then people become confident about the future housing supply. And that's how we can see stability in the property market.
So, welcome back to the Budget Forum. Now, Fong Kali from TMHK, Financial Secretary. In the budget, you mentioned a point about the fiscal reserve. So, what is the right level? You said you have looked at the previous downturns and you believe we are at a stable level. But during the SARS period, the fiscal reserve equaled 12 months of government spending. But for your budget starting from this year, in the next 4 years, the reserve will just be 12 months of government spending. And at one point, the fiscal reserve will drop below $800 billion. So do you think an alarm has been sounded? And we have already dropped to the level of $800 billion. Are you concerned that there won't be enough buffer if there should be further adversities? So what is the right fiscal reserve level? I think different people have different opinions. Some say the more the better. And others say that the government shouldn't really hold on to a high level of fiscal reserve, that otherwise we'll just be holding up resources. Instead, we should release the resources to the community. After all, there is a high efficiency in utilizing resources in the private market. So there are indeed divergent views. We've reviewed the past few economic cycles since the unification. We've been through 3 economic cycles, and our assessment is this. Hong Kong is a small, open economy, so we are very much affected by external factors. So there could be much fluctuation in our economy. And that's why we cannot just look at the budget surplus or deficit year from year. It's the same when we look at our fiscal reserve. We are at a healthy level. If you look at other countries or places, there aren't many governments that have a reserve that equals 12 months of government spending. So we believe we are safe here. Now, for the budget, there are other demands. Some have asked for tax relief, and some have suggested the tax concession for foreign domestic helper expenses, and also so there are other tax incentive suggestions. So how come you didn't take aboard all these suggestions? Well, we have to consider various factors. First, the affordability of the government. About the tax deduction for mortgage interest payments. We've been doing that for a number of years. In the past, the interest rate was not high, and now interest rate has gone up, and we will see if we have to watch the situation further to see if we can do something. As for tax deduction for foreign domestic helpers' expenses, well, we have taken forward various measures to lessen the burden on the middle class. For example, interest rate, tax deduction of interest rate for mortgage, and also tax deduction for payment of for annuity payments and so on. And altogether, we have foregone some $20 billion of revenue for all these tax measures. And given our current financial position, so we'll leave it at that for now. Let's talk about innovation and technology now. There's a suggestion of setting up the Artificial Intelligence Supercomputing Center. What are your considerations there? Well, we're going to do a consultancy study to decide on the location of the center and also the capacity of the center. We will probably finish the study this year, and after we have a report, then we will proceed with the project. Now, I asked actually ChatGPT to help us come up with this question. Have you tried it? No, I haven't, but I heard about it. No, because this is the hottest thing now in the tech market. Now, you said you're going to spend $3 billion in promoting AI. So do you think it will include ChatGPT? Well, what we have in mind is providing platforms for universities and research institutes. Because, for Hong Kong, we have strong R&D capabilities in tertiary institutions. For example, from 1 to N, we are rather good, but at the same time, there's much competition. So we want to bring more talents to Hong Kong, and then we could form a talent pool, and then we could bring in businesses. And with more businesses here, they will bring more talents of them, and then there will be more jobs created. So that's the whole thinking. Sammy Chin from Phoenix TV. Now, there are going to be a number of major infrastructure projects. That's why you're proposing an infrastructure bond, and you are even thinking of allowing retail investors to subscribe to these bonds. So would it become a regular exercise to issue bonds? Does it mean that so it's easier for you to raise money? That means you'll be spending more. Is that the case? Fiscal discipline is important. We'll definitely observe that rigidly. And then for the bonds issued, the money we collect will be for investing in the future. For example, investing in infrastructure projects because they will benefit our economic development, and then for revenues from bond issuance, they will not be spent on recurrent expenditure. In the next 5 years, we're going to issue bonds worth $65 billion. So it's because we have conduct study in the market, and that's why we've come up with this program. And then we'll have close communication with various parties, and then the credit rating agencies will have a better idea as to why we are proposing to issue bonds. And also, if we have a clear bond program, then it will help us to have good response for the bond issuance and also to have more competitive rates. So have you changed your position in this respect? No, not at all. In the next few years, government spending was 20% at the peak of GDP, and it's dropped to 22 to 23% now. As for our recurrent expenditure growth, in the last 3 years of our medium-range forecast period, you see the growth rate will be slower than that for GDP. That means expenditure growth is within our means in terms of our GDP growth. It's because of the pandemic that we've spent more, that's true. So we have to, control our spending. And then, say, with government expenditures such as some civil service expenses, we have, contained the growth of the civil service size and so on. And then we also increasing tax revenues. And then we could have a stable and financial position, and we could move forward in terms of economic development. Now, land sale revenue will be $85 billion. But then when you set the target, have you taken into account the cases of failed bids in recent months? When we set the target of the estimate of $85 billion, we've referred to past experience, and also we've looked at the land application list to see what sites are on it. So we are confident in that sense. Last year, we have relatively less land sale revenue. One reason is the failed bids. The other reason is because there are fewer private development projects. The year before, the number was much larger. So we believe, therefore, this estimate is about right in the medium term. Now, Financial Secretary, you said, generating revenue is more important for making savings. But there are some measures on revenue generation, but do you think your targets are too aggressive, though? Yes, we did consider that. Say we want to generate more revenues. We consider whether we should increase the salaries tax rate or profits tax rate, and after consideration, we believe it is not the right time to do so. Because we've been through three difficult years, everyone needs some breathing space. They need and recover from it. So that's why we want to limit the impact when we increase taxes at this point in time. So that's why we have raised the football betting duty $2.4 billion a year. We believe the impact will be relatively less, and it will be more acceptable to the public. And also, it will not affect our efforts in competing for talents and businesses. You mentioned betting duty. The convener of the Executive Council, Mrs. Regina Ip, said that there is a consensus between the government and the Jockey Club. But then the Jockey Club subsequently said that you should consider a holistic approach in reviewing the betting duty rate. Now, this increase of $2.4 billion of football betting duty, what are your considerations? Now, we're talking about $2.4 billion per year, so 5 years, $12 billion. That's for football betting. And that it translates to about raising the football betting duty rate from 50% to about 62 to 63%. Now, of course, the gaming industry does face competition. Outside of Hong Kong, say in neighboring places, there are legal online betting platforms. So that's why there is competition, and we will watch that closely. As for this fixed amount, a year, well, that means there's clarity. Everybody knows how much the government is collecting. And then they also know we're going to do that in the next 5 years. At the same time, we will watch closely the competition in this industry. And we'll keep reviewing the situation. And we will not rule out reviewing that at the right time. Let's take another break.
Welcome back to the last part of the show. Over to cable TV, Mr. Andrew Yun, Financial Secretary. Let's focus on the stock market. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange will explore arrangements for market operation during inclement weather. And what about seniors? How can they access the stock market? There's also the insurance issue. Are you saying that we don't have enough trading days? I believe the stock exchange is exploring more room for business, so they're studying the matter. I believe they will study the matters you just raised. Mr. Chen, this is the first budget of the current term government. Is there any difference between the philosophy in the budget and the previous ones? How would you rate your own budget? For the current term government, it is adopting a new mindset, capable government, efficient market, and bring these two together. So this government is being proactive in attracting businesses and talent. We've set up the Office for Attracting Strategic Enterprises. We are in touch with many parties. Some came to us. In other cases, we approached those firms. In the future, we will focus on developing the economy, creating quality jobs, and we will step up our efforts in those areas. On livelihood, we have done a lot of work. When appropriate, we roll out measures. But the idea is to focus on developing the economy. Mr. Chen, we're coming out of COVID. There are more than 350,000 small and medium enterprises. There's an extension for the loan guarantee schemes covering SMEs. In Singapore, their budget covers more than just funding. They have policy measures. Over in Singapore, they get experts to join the management to help those businesses become more competitive. Can we do more for our SMEs? There are several measures. There's a loan guarantee scheme to help SMEs with liquidity. We also have the BUD Fund, the Brand Upgrading and Promotion of Markets Fund, known as the BUD Fund. The funding can be in millions of dollars. Businesses can apply to the fund for multiple times, up to $7 million. Businesses can explore their businesses in the mainland and Southeast Asia countries that have entered into agreements with us or free trade agreements with us. We also have a technology voucher and more. Cyberport will be helping. We have picked retail and restaurant. We're looking at standardized software that businesses can access so that they can achieve digital transformation. There's also development funds for SMEs. We're also working through the Hong Kong Trade Development Council on promotion. On exhibition, we also offer help when SMEs take part in exhibitions, but we cannot spell out every single measure in the budget. Mr. Chen, the harsh measures are still there. But in this budget, in last year's budget, there's coverage on the home market. Last year, there was a relaxation of a cap on the mortgage insurance. This year, there is an adjustment to the ad valorem stamp duty. We've seen increases in transactions, but then when home prices drop, other people's bought at a high price. But given the adjustment this year, we will see a rise in negative equity cases. But there is continuity in our measures. For those first-time buyers, for their own occupation, we want to give them a helping hand. This is the idea behind the mortgage insurance. During our consultation, some have told us they had the income to pay off the mortgage, but they just lacked the down payment. So we took the measure about the mortgage insurance to help them. In the consultation for this year's budget, we were told about the possibility to lower the stamp duty for young people who want to buy their own flat for their own occupation. People have to save up before they can own their home. So we are adjusting the rate in scale 2 of the ad valorem stamp duty. And people have to consider the risks and their means before purchasing property. We want to make it easier for people in terms of the rules and the cost. And people have to make up their own mind whether they want to buy the property. They have to consider their financial position and job security, etc. The consumption voucher this time around will be $5,000. There are people coming to Hong Kong through admission schemes or coming here to pursue studies. In the afternoon, you said the consumption vouchers will cover applicants of the top talent scheme. More than 7,000 applicants have received approval. Now, will the consumption vouchers attract more people to apply to come here through the top talent pass scheme? When's the cutoff date? And if not, it would be hard to tell how much money you will have to dish out. The idea started last year when non-permanent residents could get half the consumption voucher. And here's the cutoff line. Someone comes here to stay here. As long as there is no restriction on the stay, they get half the amount. People come here, they work, even if they're not permanent residents, they contribute to the economy, so we give them half the amount. It doesn't matter what admission scheme they come here through. The relevant point is that they have come here, and whether they are staying here and become permanent residents. That's the relevant question. As for the time frame and the cutoff line, we will be announcing details later. We're trying to attract talent, and there's no cutoff date. But the application for the admission schemes are going on, then you get a messy situation. We will consider those factors. There are consumption vouchers, and there are also SME loan guarantee schemes. How will the government handle an exit arrangement? The loan guarantee schemes will expire in June or July, but then came the announcement that the schemes will be extended. So what will be done about that? We have been in touch with the banks about the SME financing guarantee schemes. We need to consolidate the economic recovery. During our consultation, SMEs have told us that they laid off people, but now they want to expand the operation. It takes time for them to expand. So they want more time, they want loans for them to expand their business. This idea applies to travel agencies. We have a scheme for travel agencies so that they have easier access to funding. For tourist coaches, the same idea applies. It's a recovery we want them to help them expand their operations quickly. There will be an exit arrangement. Different measures are required under different circumstances. Now, I've already explained why we're rolling out consumption vouchers again, but then we cannot keep rolling out consumption vouchers over the long term. We have to proceed cautiously and look at the circumstances. Attracting talent is a key area in the government's policies. There is the Capital Investment Entrance Scheme, or CIES. Will the mainland be covered? The eligibility is the same as what we had last time. The mainland wasn't covered in the last round of a CIES, so the same principle will apply this time. Properties will not count as eligible investments under the scheme. The investment threshold will be way higher this time to bring so that people can invest more here. And also, we will require that these entrants invest in certain industries in areas we want them to put money into, such as tech startups. The relevant policy bureaus are studying the details. It's more than just about getting people to bring capital here. It's also about driving the development in the industries here. We almost an hour into the show. I'm sure you're now better informed about the budget. In the days to come, the Financial Secretary will continue to discuss the budget. The time is up. We'll see you.